What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some news about State of Decay 3, which received a bit of a surprise update, if you will, a couple of days ago that, truth be told, I was not initially planning to cover because it's relatively small, and yet the more I kind of dug into it, I got intrigued by a couple of things. Either way, however, you may remember that like a week or so back, I mentioned that the Xbox Games Showcase for June was set up, and one of the games I would have liked to have seen there was State of Decay 3. Well, obviously it turns out I did not have to wait quite that long, because here we are with this update. Now, to just kick off with the actual news here, basically, State of Decay 3, or Undead Labs, really, their developer, put out a video talking about the current state of the game and an upcoming plan for alpha tests to start next month in May. You can sign up over on their website if you want to be considered to join those alpha play tests. And from what I understand, they've been testing like builds and stuff of it with like a player council for a good little while. And so long story short, after all of this time, the game initially being announced, I want to say like 5 years ago, should start to get hopefully regular updates as they start picking up a faster development pace. But those alpha playtests are said to be focusing on 4-player co-op, some of their new base building and resource mechanics, and of course a whole bunch of fighting zombies. And given that it's been pretty much radio silence for quite some time, it'll obviously be fun to see people get some actual information about whatever state the title is actually in out there for everyone to see, which will hopefully be pretty cool, at least provided the alpha doesn't come with like an NDA, which happens sometimes but not always. I didn't see any mention of that here. But as far as the news for this particular little update goes, that's pretty much it. And yet, even in just hearing and listening to some of that, when I went to just kind of figure out what this was all about, it raised a couple of questions for me. For starters, this game, as I've already mentioned, was announced quite some time ago, and here in 2026, we're just now getting to the alpha. That is certainly of note, especially given everything that's been going on in the games industry at large with like layoffs and whatnot. And so to hear this game does not seem to be as far along in development as one might expect, even just given the basic timeline of it, and yet we haven't heard anything in terms of what's going on with the studio internally, that raised some questions for me. Questions I don't really have the answers to, but are in large part like, what are the financials of this company? How well has State of Decay 2 been doing that they've been able to focus on updating that while also apparently slow-rolling State of Decay 3, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, to be clear. You'll find that a lot of times with any kind of time management, however, there is a sort of fine line between giving yourself a healthy amount of time to get something done or giving yourself too much time and that kind of breaking down into paralysis, you know. Perfect being the enemy of good, that kind of thing. But all that development time costs money, and like I said, I was just very curious about the financials of that situation. I would love to get my hands on actual numbers, but obviously they are not going to give that to me, and yet I think we'll have a partial answer to this question simply by looking at State of Decay 2. State of Decay 2 is a game that had very long legs. It's a game I personally enjoyed. Didn't really ever cover it on the channel. I played it back when it was near-ish its original release, and I wasn't doing YouTube as like a job back then, even though I was on the website. And it's a great game that got better over time, and I have not played a significant amount of the updates because they kept updating it. Its final update, I believe, was at like the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, somewhere in there. So it's a game that changed a lot over time, but that's mostly because it kept selling a lot over time. And part of the update we got recently about State of Decay 3 was that for the past several years, the majority of Undead Labs development resources have been spent on the updates for State of Decay 2, while a smaller team has been working on State of Decay 3 internally. Now, if that's been the case, one would assume that that had to make sense financially and that State of Decay 2 was selling really well, and that's where those long legs come in, because while the game initially sold about 1 million units or so, from its initial release in 2018 to 2021, it had sold about 10 million copies. All the way here in 2026, I don't believe there is a full accounting of the player numbers anywhere, but, you know, suffice to say it has probably grown, and it has presumably been doing so well over time that it was able to sustain their development processes and everything so well that they weren't on any potential chopping block while also working towards this new game. But even some of that is just guesswork on my end that I have to say is unusual if it's the case, but everything about this situation really makes me wish I had access to their monthly P&L, because I would be deeply interested in how well State of Decay 2 has been doing and just kind of what the overall costs of this studio look like, because something about seeing this game just now announcing alpha play tests after all that time since the third game's initial announcement hints at a story that is potentially very interesting in a way that I find interesting, but I admit most people probably wouldn't care too much about. But putting all of that stuff to the side, I am still deeply interested in what they wind up doing with 3, because 2 was a really interesting game. I'm not usually one for like big zombie survival type stuff, and yet State of Decay 2 was a very engrossing experience because of the way it got you involved in like the individual survivors that you would be controlling. Not to mention the co-op, which obviously gives something like this longer legs, being able to play it with friends, but you would basically control one survivor at a time, each of them having like their own traits and stats and stuff, which would make certain playstyles with that survivor more or less viable, and then of course use them to their advantage while also trying to fight off the zombies and get to the plague hearts you need to destroy, while also trying to upgrade and maintain your own base. And all in all, it was just a really interesting experience, and I'm very curious to see how State of Decay 3 would take and evolve that formula. I think there's certainly different avenues that I don't really want to speculate on, as opposed to just waiting and seeing what they've got ready at this point, but really even just the prospect of evolving and iterating upon what was already in 2 is intriguing enough for me. But obviously, we hopefully at least won't have to wait too much longer to see some of that for ourselves. And so for today, I think that is pretty much going to do it. I'd love to hear what you guys think about all of this down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.